I think it's time for a little story. It's definitely story time.
Patiently waiting for the Imaginaerum review. I apologize for the wait, and I also apologize for the audio quality on the Dark Passion Play review. The reason why it's all live footage and bootleg footage is because copyright claimers won't let me use the actual songs from like the Amaranth video or Bye Bye Beautiful or whatever, so I was restricted to just using bootleg and soundboard footage instead of pro shot stuff. And unfortunately, the stuff that I used in that review do not do the songs justice. If you really are not convinced of the Dark Passion Play album after listening to me, I still highly suggest you go listen to it. Anyway, now it's time for Imaginaerum. Yes, I have a video where I reviewed Imaginaerum right after it came out and gave my first thoughts on it, but my opinions have changed on it, and for the events that have happened afterwards, I've decided to update my view on the album and talk about the film a little bit and the departure of Anette and immediate replacement of Floriansen. After the mega tour promoting Dark Passion Play, obviously there was some time and speculation on what they would do next, and what ended up happening came as a welcome surprise to many, not just a concept album, but a movie as well. Because of this, Imaginaerum became one of the most anticipated albums I had to wait for. I had high hopes for Imaginaerum in a sense that I was in love with the bombastic and double bass heavy songs, and I did feel like Once and Century Child and Dark Passion Play even had some mid-tempo filler, so I was just hoping that it not only was a continuation, but that they continued to add songs that were both faster and heavier and slower and softer to change things up. So I was hoping for another diverse album. But instead, with Imaginaerum, it's quite the opposite. Because of this, Imaginaerum is easily their most accessible album. Their album utilizes their mid-tempo melodic approach pretty much beyond the limit, and it's a lot more consistent sound-wise. But it still manages to have no two songs sound exactly the same, which is an accomplishment, in my view. It explores the folk sound a bit more, and more songs use flutes, pipes, whistles bitrodonically, and whereas on Dark Passion Play there was thrash and alternative metal influences, Imaginaerum has its share of doom metal, which sacrifices speed and power for gloom and heaviness, which is what Nightwish had been doing already. And the other complaint I had with it is 3 of the 13 songs are also orchestral interlude songs that signify the beginning, intermission, and the end, much like a play, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. It's a bad thing because that makes it only 10 new songs rather than 13. Now, how does Imaginaerum still hold up? The album as a whole is still downright beautiful, just like I said before. From start to finish, there really isn't a bad moment on this album, nor does it really have a boring or a bland song. My favorite parts on the album are like the beginning to Scare Tale, the middle breakdown of I Want My Tears Back, the spaghetti western influence of Turn Loose the Mermaid, the first half of Song of Myself, which should really be its own standalone song and not contain a poem. Now, since this was their first concept album, I did have to talk about the concept, which is a composer on his deathbed reminiscing on his youth. So each song represents a certain period in his life. The first half of the album is basically his youth and his young adult days. And the last half of the album, with songs like The Crow, the Owl, and the Dove, and Mermaids and Rest Calm, are representing the moments after you reach your zenith or your high point, and then you have your swan song and your slowing down moments, with Last Ride of the Day and Song of Myself representing the roller coaster feelings you get when you know the end is near, and essentially one last hurrah, and at the same time celebrating life itself as a whole. Now, with the song Imaginaerum that closes the album, I can totally see it as a song that may play in your head when you die, and as your life flashes before your eyes, you see various important moments, represented by the themes that are being played in the song. In fact, when I die, I want this song to be played with an accompanying slideshow representing every important moment in my life being displayed. So if you ever attend my funeral, there's what I want. How does it hold up to the other albums? Well, I wasn't as blown away with it as I was with Dark Passion Play, but I still think Anette was a lot more mature with her position in the band, and she shines a lot more than before. And one thing I can point out is Marco may not have had a standalone song unless you count the intro, but his voice is heard in the background or in a duet on basically most of the songs. Plus, he wrote one of them. This, of course, leads to the argument that during Anette Ozon's time, her best songs were always the ones with Marco all over them. And if that's the case, then I see that as coincidence, not because I think they were imposing Marco Hitala a lot more to hide Anette. And I may love the sound of Imaginaerum as a whole, but I still feel like because of the consistency, it was mostly melodic, and it really didn't change anything up like I wanted it to. And it really made me miss the other albums that included faster and more powerful songs. How about the movie? Well, the movie was originally going to be more or less a collection of music videos for every song on the album, but then they decided there should be spoken dialogue, and they turned it into a full movie with a bigger story. And honestly, if it had a bigger budget and more stars, it really could have taken off as a legitimate Hollywood movie. It was a very well done story. But it had, like I said, cheap effects, and not so known actors. And when I finally got my chance to view it, at first I had to get over the fact that Nightwish themselves will only be in there for a couple scenes. Now, I don't want to ruin the movie too much, but it's easily way different than the original story, but it does follow the basic concept. The actors did a good job with what they were given with, and I did like the way the band was utilized. The Scare Tale music video part was awesome, and there were a lot of other cool parts in the movie too. And lots of times I find myself listening to the score version of the Imaginaerum album, especially like the score version of Last Ride of the Day, which is called I Have to Let You Go. It's just epic and really captures the essence of not just what the song is about, but that whole scene as well. Other than that, there really isn't much to say about it. It's not a film that appeals to everyone, and typically only Nightwish fans will fall in love with the movie at first. But the movie is good for what it is, and plus it is kind of awkward now because of Anette no longer being in the band, which sadly will bring me to my closing statements, and they involve the departure of Anette and immediately replacement of Flor Jansen. Now, I would try to make this as short as possible. If you already know the story of what happened, then go to my closing statements. Don't go through this part. Just skip ahead. When we thought the band was drama-free and more together than ever, 10 months into the Imaginaerum tour, Anette and Nightwish parted ways. Now, for those that did not know exactly what happened, during the North American leg, Anette got sick and was hospitalized, and instead of canceling a show, the band decided to play on using guest vocalists from Camelot. In response, Anette posted an angry remark on her blog saying she didn't approve of it, essentially, And after she recovered more for one show, the news came out on September 29th that they parted ways and Floor Jansen was immediately going to continue the rest of the tour as a guest. And eventually, she and Troy Donockley would become full-time members over the summer of 2013. Now, after a year of silence, Anette finally claimed in an interview that she lost support of the bandmates while stress over her personal life and health was getting out of control and eventually fired. Blah, blah, blah. She claimed part of it was because of her being sick and pregnant. But then you have Nightwish saying, no, we dismissed her, not because of illness or pregnancy, but because we realized her personality didn't really fit well with us, and she was detrimental to the work community. And it went on, he said, she said, blah, 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 blah. But later on, Anette did have a very interesting statement about her and the replacement singer. And she says, quote, I would have been too pregnant to go to Australia, so I wanted to push the date back, but the band didn't want to do that. Discussions about a substitute came up, and at first I was like, all right, okay. But then when they mentioned Floor, it was an automatic no from me. I didn't think it was a good idea because I knew what would happen. The fans would love Floor because she was a metal singer, and I'm a pop singer, and I wanted to keep my job. Because I couldn't do the Australian tour, I think that's when they started thinking about a new singer. Of course, I knew we had our gigs to do, and I was pregnant, so it was my own fault, but it was only one small tour that they wanted to push back. I could have done with all the other gigs, and I didn't understand why they needed a substitute singer when I wanted to go. Maybe they felt they wanted to have another singer. I think that's when they wanted, but they weren't quite honest about it. I guess when I said no, they got frustrated. Maybe when I got ill, they saw a way out. Of course, then I got angry with what they did, then they got pissed off at me, I was pissed at them, and then it led to where we are now, I guess. So was this situation handled in the best way? Probably not. But unfortunately, as shady as the band might have been, this does happen a lot in any kind of business, and it absolutely sucks being on the non-beneficial side of it. Now, while there were some fans, myself included, that were rather sad and bitter about Anette leaving, I was surprised to learn that the majority of fans were happy with her being dismissed, and even more in favor of Floor being the singer. Now, both singers before were great. They both had their own level of uniqueness, and they both had a novelty to them. But when I listened to Annette's solo album and when I listened to Terria's solo album, hold up to their standards. So when people say that they need Nightwish, I agree. Now with Anette, sir, she may not have been as comfortable singing the older songs that required a higher vocal range than she had, but she could hold her own on most of the time. Others were glad that Anette was gone because not only did her vocals not sound metal enough in their eyes, but her presence and persona on stage, with her dancing on stage like she was in the Spice Girls to songs like Bless the Child and Ghost Love Score, probably turned some people off. And a lot of people also said she was inconsistent live with her voice, thus sounded rather stale to a lot of people. The fact that she struggled on songs that weren't for her range really didn't bug me that much, but it did bug a lot of fans. Now, as my opinion on Floor, believe it or not, I actually had never heard of her until her name got announced. And in fact, the split and subsequent replacement actually happened right before they were supposed to play a show in Anaheim. And my then girlfriend, now fiance, were so bitter about the split that she flat out said, I'm not going. So we were among the crowd that was upset Anette was gone. And then watching clips of Floor first singing songs like Scaretale and Storytime, I felt she didn't hold herself up. But a few minutes later, one day on Pandora, an After Forever song came on, and I was like, hey, isn't this Floor Jansen? She actually is pretty good. So I checked her out, and the more I looked her up, the more I realized, hey, Floor is not only a well-seasoned vocalist, but she's also classically trained and is also a vocal instructor, and she's actually very respected and is definitely a lot better of a metal singer and a better performer on stage than Teria and Anette. And in a sense, it was like getting Babe Ruth to step in when you lost your star batter. So they definitely needed someone like her for that reason. The band itself was getting bigger, and as long as they got bigger, the higher they are in demand for big tours and big album releases, they couldn't just find a new singer to test the water again. They needed an experienced one. And then finally, when I started watching Floor on YouTube performing older songs from the Teria era, I instantly got excited for her in Nightwish and was blown away by the Showtime Storytime live album they released. She fits very well with the band, and her performance of Ghost Love Score on the live album sends me even more chills than the original version. Hopefully, this means Third Time is a charm when it comes to vocalists. That documentary about Floor coming in the band shows a band coming together more, and they all seem happier together, but I saw the same thing before with Anette, so of course I'm a little skeptical. If Floor ends up getting kicked out and leaves the band, then we can literally call Nightwish the Van Halen of symphonic metal and finally say this band just doesn't know how to get along with their singers. For closing thoughts, if you made it this far, I'm definitely excited to see what the first official album with Floor Jansen will be like. Both my fiance and I have seen Floor perform live with Revamp, and she was so good on stage that my fiance actually put her bitterness aside and started liking her. Plus, meeting her and taking pictures was also a plus. She has the potential to add much more than Terria and Annette ever could. She can sing any range, plus can grunt, scream, and pack a powerful punch to the song she sings, and sound just as consistent live. It'll be interesting to see how Floor will be utilized, and I just hope that they do her justice. Because I feel like if they do another Imaginaerum, she'll be underutilized. And it could be a disappointing album. With Troy now a full-time member, you can obviously expect more flutes and pipes and whistles, but them having upbeat songs like I Want My Tears Back shows that he won't be restricted to just folk ballads. Now, they have teased us and said the new album will have the longest song Nightwish has ever written to date, which could either be a good thing or a bad thing. But one thing for certain thing is, I really hope and I really don't think we're going to get another Imaginaerum-esque sounding album. The Imaginaerum album put more emphasis on theatrics and less on the band, and I feel like the next album will be the opposite. Now with Floor having a huge range and a metal background, and her vocals suiting more for the darker, more powerful songs of old, we could be in for a treat again.